In the stagnant heat of morning, a man in a dark suit drives down a trail, choked with weeds. In the back seat, a tied-up German shepherd struggles to stay upright. Without looking back, the man drags him out and places him on the tracks of an abandoned railway. Beside him, an open suitcase with a diapered baby is left without explanation. A rusted security camera records it all in silence. The sound of a train builds in the distance. As the headlight grows brighter, the baby starts to crawl, and then the screen goes dark. Love stories with animals? Then subscribe now and never miss one. Thanks for being with us. Now, back to the story. The heavy summer air pressed down on Oak Ridge, a once thriving industrial town in Pennsylvania, now fighting to redefine itself in a changing economy. At 6:47 a.m., train engineer Frank Wilson was just 3 hours away from completing his overnight haul when the impossible happened. As the freight train rounded a bend near the old paper mill, Frank spotted something that made his blood run cold. A baby, no more than a year old, sitting upright on the tracks in nothing but a diaper. Next to the child sat a severely malnourished German shepherd, its paws bound with frayed rope, eyes filled with a mixture of fear and resignation. "Jesus Christ!" Frank shouted, pulling the emergency brake with all his strength. The massive freight train screeched in protest, metal grinding against metal in a desperate attempt to defy physics. By some miracle, a word that would soon be on everyone's lips, the train stopped mere yards from the infant and dog. Frank's hands shook uncontrollably as he radioed for help, his voice barely recognizable to the dispatcher who'd known him for 15 years. "I don't know how we stopped in time," he kept repeating, tears streaming down his weathered face. "I don't know how." Within 20 minutes, the quiet tracks had transformed into a scene of organized chaos. Police officers, paramedics, animal control, and curious onlookers gathered as word spread through the small town like wildfire. Paramedic Lisa Chen carefully examined the baby, a chubby-cheeked boy with curious blue eyes who seemed remarkably unfazed by his brush with fate. "He's in perfect health," she reported with disbelief. "Not a scratch, no signs of dehydration, well fed. It's as if someone placed him there just minutes before the train came." The German shepherd was another story. Animal Control Officer Marcus Williams approached the dog with caution, but was surprised when the animal showed no aggression, only a deep wariness. "His paws are raw from the rope," Marcus observed, gently cutting the bindings. "He's been neglected, but he's not feral. This dog had a home once." As news vans began to arrive, Officer Claire Bennett tried to establish a perimeter. "Has anyone reported a missing child?" she asked her partner, who was already on the radio with dispatch. The answer was negative. No reports of missing children in Oak Ridge or the surrounding counties. By noon, the story had captured the attention of the entire region. Pictures of the baby boy, temporarily named Track by the hospital staff, and the sad-eyed German shepherd appeared on local news broadcasts. Social media exploded with theories, prayers, and calls for justice. The hashtag, #DoMiracle on the Tracks, began trending, bringing national attention to the small town of Oak Ridge. At Oak Ridge Memorial Hospital, social worker Denise Hoffman sat beside the baby's crib, watching him sleep peacefully despite the commotion his discovery had caused. 27 years in child services had hardened her to most situations, but something about this case unsettled her deeply. No identifying marks, no distinctive clothing, nothing, she murmured to Dr. Benjamin Porter as he checked the babies. "Vitals again. It's like this child appeared out of nowhere." "What about the dog?" Dr. Porter asked. "Any microchip?" "Being checked now," Denise replied. "But initial reports say the animal is extremely wary around men, especially those with deep voices. The vet tech mentioned he seems particularly disturbed by news broadcasts." Across town at the Oak Ridge Animal Rescue Center, the German Shepherd lay curled in a clean kennel, accepting treats cautiously from Jessica Walker, a 24-year-old veterinary assistant with a soft spot for difficult cases. "Hey, buddy," she whispered, sitting cross-legged outside his kennel. "You've had a rough time, haven't you? But you're safe now." The dog's ears perked up at the gentleness in her voice, but his gaze remained vigilant, scanning the room as if expecting danger to appear at any moment. Dr. Rachel Bennett, the center's chief veterinarian, approached with a tablet in hand. "No microchip that we can find, which is surprising for a purebred like him. He's severely underweight, has calluses consistent with being confined to a hard surface for extended periods, and shows signs of neglect but no obvious abuse." Jessica nodded, continuing to speak softly to the dog. "What's your story, boy? And how did you end up on those tracks with that baby?" As if in response, the television mounted in the corner of the room switched to a news segment. Maxwell Reynolds, Oak Ridge's most prominent businessman and philanthropist, was giving a statement about his latest charitable donation to the Children's Hospital. "As a community leader and father myself, I'm deeply disturbed by today's events," Reynolds said, his deep voice resonating with practiced concern. "I've instructed my foundation to offer a $50,000 reward for information leading to those responsible for this unconscionable act." At the sound of Reynolds' voice, the German Shepherd's demeanor changed dramatically. He backed into the corner of his kennel, a low growl rumbling in his throat, eyes fixed on the television screen. Jessica blinked in surprise. "Dr. Bennett, you might want to see this." Dr. Bennett turned from her paperwork, eyebrows rising as she observed the dog's reaction. "That's interesting. Make a note of it, but let's not jump to conclusions. Dogs can react negatively to specific voice timbres based on past experiences." Jessica nodded, but continued watching the dog closely as Reynolds finished his statement. The animal remained tense until the segment ended and a female news anchor returned to the screen. Meanwhile, in a modest apartment on the outskirts of town, 68-year-old Eleanor Thompson sat transfixed before her television, a forgotten cup of tea growing cold beside her. The retired investigative journalist felt a chill run through her body as the camera panned to show the baby being carried to an ambulance. "It can't be," she whispered, reaching for the framed photograph she kept on her side table. A picture of her grandson, who had disappeared under mysterious circumstances 6 years ago. The resemblance wasn't exact. How could it be after so many years? But something in the shape of the baby's eyes, the curve of his chin. Eleanor's hands trembled as she reached for her phone and the notebook she had maintained meticulously since her grandson's disappearance. Pages of leads, dead ends, and connections that the police had dismissed as coincidental or insignificant. And there, highlighted in yellow, was a name that had appeared with surprising frequency in her investigation: Maxwell Reynolds. "I knew it," she murmured, feeling a surge of energy she hadn't experienced in years. "I always knew you were involved somehow. Audrey." Across town in the Pinewood Apartments, Sarah Miller sat on the edge of her bed, hands clasped so tightly that her knuckles had turned white. The 36-year-old woman stared at the television with tears streaming down her face. "They found him," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "They actually found him." She glanced at the packed suitcase in the corner of her small bedroom, prepared weeks ago for a departure she had repeatedly postponed. Now everything had changed. The carefully constructed story she had rehearsed countless times would need to be altered. She couldn't run anymore. She would have to face what was coming. Sarah reached under her bed and pulled out a worn shoebox. Inside, wrapped in a soft blue blanket, was a handmade necklace with a small wooden charm, a name carved in delicate letters. She clutched it to her chest, rocking slightly. "I'm sorry," she repeated like a mantra. "I'm so sorry." As evening fell over Oakridge, the unlikely pair of survivors had become the catalyst for a story much larger than anyone yet realized. In the manicured garden of his sprawling estate on the hill overlooking the town, Maxwell Reynolds ended a phone call and turned to face his reflection in the French doors. For a brief moment, something other than the carefully cultivated expression of benevolence flickered across his face, something cold and calculating. He straightened his tie and took a deep breath. "Find out everything," he instructed someone on the other end of the line. "And I mean everything. This situation requires careful management." Down in the city, Ethan Parker, a freelance journalist, whose investigations had earned him more enemies than friends in Oakridge, stared at his computer screen. An anonymous email had arrived minutes after the news broke, containing only a single line of text. "The dog remembers. Do you?" Ethan leaned back in his chair, an old memory stirring in the recesses of his mind. 5 years ago, he had been working on a story about unusual adoption practices in private agencies connected to wealthy donors. The investigation had mysteriously dried up, sources disappearing overnight, and his editor had pulled the plug. Now, as he looked at the images of the German Shepherd and the baby rescued from the tracks, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was being given a second chance to uncover the truth. What no one in Oakridge yet realized was that the miracle on the tracks was just the beginning. The baby and the dog had set in motion a series of events that would strip away the veneer of respectability from the town's most powerful man, revealing secrets that had been buried for years beneath layers of influence, money, and fear. 3 days after the miracle on the tracks, Oakridge was still buzzing with speculation. The story had evolved from local sensation to national interest, with morning shows debating theories about how the train had stopped in time and who could have placed a baby and dog in such peril. At the Oakridge Department of Children and Family Services, Denise Hoffman scrolled through another batch of emails from families across the country offering to adopt Track, whose cherubic face had captured countless hearts. But adoption was far from imminent. First, they needed to determine if the child had family searching for him. A soft knock on her office door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah Miller stood in the doorway, her thin frame nearly swallowed by an oversized cardigan despite the summer heat. "I'm here about the baby," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. I think he might be in my care." Denise's expression remained neutral, though her pulse quickened. "Please, sit down, Ms. Miller." Sarah Miller. Over the next hour, Sarah wove a tale that seemed rehearsed in parts and genuinely emotional in others. She claimed to be the child's nanny, hired by a young mother who had left town suddenly 3 weeks ago, promising to return, but never did. Sarah explained she had become overwhelmed caring for the child without resources or legal guardianship, and in a moment of desperation had stepped away briefly while walking near the tracks, only to find the baby gone when she returned. "I was terrified to come forward," she concluded, dabbing at tears. "I thought I'd be arrested for negligence." Denise nodded sympathetically while making detailed notes. "And the dog? Was the German Shepherd with you as well?" Sarah hesitated, just a fraction too long. "No, I don't know anything about a dog." "I see," Denise replied, sliding a form across the desk. "We'll need to verify your relationship to the child. A DNA test would help establish if you're a relative." "I'm not a relative," Sarah said quickly, "just his caretaker." "Of course. Still, we'll need documentation, contact information for the mother, any records you might have." "I don't have much," Sarah interrupted. "She paid me in cash, said she needed discretion." As Denise continued the interview, her instincts screamed that Sarah Miller was hiding something significant. Yet there was also genuine concern in the woman's eyes when she asked about the baby's well-being. "He's being well cared for," Denise assured her. "But Ms. Miller, I should warn you that this case has drawn considerable attention. There will be a thorough investigation." Sarah's hands trembled slightly. "I understand. I just want what's best for Tommy." "Tommy?" Denise raised an eyebrow. "That's his name?" Sarah nodded, looking briefly panicked as if she'd revealed too much. "Thomas, that's what his mother called him." Across town at the Oak Ridge Animal Rescue Center, Jessica Walker had developed a special bond with the German Shepherd from the tracks, whom she'd named Guardian. The dog remained wary of most people, but had begun to accept Jessica's presence, even allowing her to sit inside his kennel. "I think he was protecting that baby," she told Dr. Bennett as they observed the dog enjoying a brief outdoor session in the center's fenced yard. "The way he was positioned on the tracks, it was like he was standing guard." Dr. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. "It's not uncommon for dogs to form protective bonds with children, even those not from their household. But there's something else going on with this one." "You mean his reaction to Maxwell Reynolds on TV?" Jessica asked. "Among other things." Dr. Bennett lowered her voice. "I've been receiving some strange calls asking about Guardian, people claiming to be from various agencies, but when I follow up, the departments have no record of such inquiries." Jessica frowned. "Someone's trying to track him down. Why?" "I don't know. But I'm keeping visitor access restricted until we figure it out." As if on cue, the center's front door chimed. Jessica peered through the window to see a silver-haired woman in her 60s with the straight-backed posture of someone used to commanding attention. "Can I help you?" Jessica asked as she approached the reception desk. "Eleanor Thompson," the woman introduced herself. "I'm interested in the German Shepherd found on the train tracks." Jessica exchanged a glance with Dr. Bennett. "Are you looking to adopt? We're not processing applications for him yet." "No, dear. I'm a retired journalist." Eleanor's eyes, sharp and clear behind stylish glasses, studied Jessica's face. "I believe that dog might be connected to a story I've been following for years." Dr. Bennett stepped forward. "What kind of story?" Eleanor hesitated, then reached into her handbag and pulled out a business card from her reporting days, along with a more recent photo of a German Shepherd puppy. "6 years ago, my grandson disappeared under suspicious circumstances. During my investigation, I came across mentions of a German Shepherd puppy that belonged to a person of interest. The timing matches this dog's approximate age." Jessica studied the photo. The markings were similar, but many German Shepherds shared comparable coloring. "It's possible, but I'd just like to see him," Eleanor pressed. "I won't disturb him. I just need to check something." Dr. Bennett considered the request. 10 minutes, supervised. "If the dog shows any signs of distress, the visit ends immediately." Eleanor nodded gratefully. As they walked toward Guardian's kennel, she spoke quietly. "Have you noticed anything unusual about his behavior? Specific triggers, perhaps?" Jessica hesitated before answering. "He seems disturbed by certain male voices, especially on television." "Anyone in particular?" Eleanor asked, her voice carefully neutral. "It might be nothing, but he had a strong reaction to Maxwell Reynolds during a news segment." Eleanor's steps faltered momentarily. Did he now? How interesting. When they reached Guardian's kennel, the dog was lying on his bed, alert but calm. As Eleanor approached slowly, he lifted his head, nostrils flaring as he caught her scent. For a tense moment, Jessica prepared to intervene if needed. Then, unexpectedly, Guardian rose and moved closer to the kennel door, his tail giving a tentative wag. "Hello, old friend," Eleanor whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "You remember, don't you?" Across town in his penthouse office atop the Reynolds Tower, Maxwell Reynolds paced behind his mahogany desk, phone pressed to his ear. "What do you mean you can't find her? Sarah Miller isn't exactly a master of evasion. She's been in the same apartment for 4 years. He listened impatiently to the response. "No, don't approach her directly. Just locate her." "And what about the dog? Any progress on having it transferred to county animal control where we have more influence?" The answer displeased him. He ended the call abruptly and turned to the wall of windows overlooking Oak Ridge. For decades, he had carefully constructed his image as the town's benevolent patron. Reynolds Enterprises employed nearly 20% of the local workforce. The Reynolds Foundation funded everything from the Children's Hospital to the Summer Arts Program. His influence extended into every corner of local government and business. And now, a baby and a dog threatened to unravel everything. His intercom buzzed. "Mr. Reynolds, Michael Foster is here to see you." Maxwell's jaw tightened. Michael Foster had been his personal assistant for nearly a decade before an abrupt resignation 2 years ago. Their parting had been tense, with Michael hinting that he'd seen too much to continue in good conscience. "Send him in," Maxwell instructed, composing his features into a mask of cordial professionalism. Michael entered cautiously, looking much older than his 36 years. Once impeccably groomed, he now sported a beard and casual clothes that suggested a complete departure from corporate life. "Michael, this is unexpected." "I saw the news," Michael replied without preamble. "The baby and the dog on the tracks. That's Sentinel, isn't it? Your dog from the lake house." Maxwell's expression remained impassive. "I have no idea what you're talking about. I've never owned a German Shepherd." "Cut the act, Max. There's only one reason that dog would be with that baby, and we both know what it is." Michael leaned forward, lowering his voice. "I kept your secrets for years. I helped cover up your indiscretions because I believed in the good work we were doing. But this crosses a line. Are you threatening me, Michael?" Maxwell's voice was dangerously soft. "I'm giving you a chance to do the right thing. That child deserves to know his heritage and the truth about what happened to his mother." "Get out of my office," Maxwell hissed. "Whatever delusions you're harboring about me could be construed as defamation. Remember your non-disclosure agreement." Michael straightened, a sad smile on his face. "I figured you'd say that. Just know that I'm not the only one who remembers, Max. That dog remembers too." After Michael left, Maxwell remained motionless, staring at the closed door. Then, with deliberate calmness, he reached for his phone and dialed a number he rarely used. "It's me," he said when the call connected. "We have a situation that requires your specialized attention. The matter we discussed years ago has resurfaced." "Yes, both of them." "No, containment is still the priority. No permanent solutions. Just secure and relocate." At the Oak Ridge Herald, the town's struggling newspaper of record, Ethan Parker scrolled through archives of articles featuring Maxwell Reynolds. After receiving the cryptic email about the dog, Ethan had begun reconnecting with sources from his abandoned investigation years earlier. "What am I missing?" he muttered, pinning another article to the digital corkboard on his screen. Maxwell Reynolds' philanthropic activities, business acquisitions, public appearances, all meticulously documented over 20 years of local coverage. A notification pinged on his laptop, a response to one of his inquiries. A former Reynolds Enterprises employee had agreed to meet, anonymously, at a diner outside town limits in 2 hours. As Ethan gathered his recorder and notebook, his phone buzzed with a text from an unknown number. Be careful who you trust. The Reynolds family has ears everywhere. Meanwhile, at her modest apartment, Eleanor Thompson spread her investigation materials across her dining table. After seeing Guardian at the animal shelter, she was more convinced than ever that she was on the right track. The dog had recognized her, or at least hadn't reacted negatively to her scent, which she attributed to her having visited her grandson at the Reynolds Lake House several times before his disappearance. Her daughter Jenny had worked as a housekeeper for the Reynolds family. After becoming pregnant by a man she refused to name, Jenny had continued working until the baby was born. Eleanor had been suspicious of the child's parentage, but respected her daughter's privacy. Then, when the baby was 6 months old, both Jenny and the child had vanished. The official investigation concluded that Jenny had left town voluntarily, despite leaving behind all her belongings and identification. Eleanor never believed it. And now, 6 years later, a baby and a German shepherd had appeared on the train tracks, setting in motion what she hoped would finally be the path to truth. Her doorbell rang, startling her from her thoughts. Through the peephole, she saw a nervous-looking Sarah Miller clutching a purse to her chest. "Ms. Thompson," Sarah said when Eleanor opened the door. "My name is Sarah Miller. I was Tommy's caretaker. I think we need to talk." Eleanor Thompson's hands trembled slightly as she poured tea for her unexpected visitor. Sarah Miller sat rigidly on the edge of the sofa, her eyes darting occasionally to the wall of photographs and newspaper clippings that Eleanor had assembled over the years. "You've been investigating the Reynolds family," Sarah observed, her voice barely above a whisper. "Not the family, just Maxwell," Eleanor corrected, setting down the teapot, "and specifically his connection to my daughter Jenny and my grandson Noah, who disappeared 6 years ago." Sarah's eyes widened at the name. "Noah?" "Yes," Eleanor confirmed, studying Sarah's reaction carefully. "My grandson was 6 months old when he vanished along with my daughter. The police investigation was suspiciously brief and inadequate." "And you think Tommy is your grandson?" Sarah asked, her fingers clutching the teacup so tightly Eleanor feared it might shatter. "I don't know," Eleanor admitted, "but I recognize that dog. He was a puppy at Maxwell's Lake House the last time I visited Jenny there." She leaned forward. "Ms. Miller, who are you really? And what do you know about that child?" Sarah set down her untouched tea, took a deep breath, and began to speak. "I worked for the Reynolds family as a nanny, not for Maxwell's public family, his wife and 2 daughters everyone knows about. I worked at the lake house, caring for other children." Eleanor felt her heart racing. "Other children? What do you mean?" "Maxwell Reynolds has secrets," Sarah continued, her voice growing steadier. "He has arrangements with women. When these arrangements result in complications, he has systems in place to manage them." "You're saying he has illegitimate children?" Eleanor asked bluntly. Sarah nodded. 3 that I know of, all kept away from public view. The mothers are paid handsomely for their discretion and relocated, far from Oak Ridge. The children are raised with private staff at the lake house until they're old enough for boarding schools abroad. Eleanor struggled to process this information. "And Jenny? My daughter?" Sarah's expression turned pained. Jenny was different. She refused the arrangement. She threatened to go public about Maxwell being the father of her baby. There was a confrontation at the lake house. I wasn't supposed to be there, but I overheard everything from the nursery where I was watching. "Noah, what happened?" Eleanor demanded, dread pooling in her stomach. Maxwell was furious. He said she'd regret challenging him. The next day, security staff told me Jenny had agreed to a settlement after all and had left the country. I was instructed to continue caring for Noah as if nothing had changed. Eleanor shook her head vehemently. That's impossible. Jenny would never abandon Noah, never. I know, Sarah whispered. I didn't believe it either, especially after I found her phone and wallet hidden in a planter on the terrace. The two women stared at each other, the implication hanging heavily between them. What happened to my daughter? Eleanor asked, her voice breaking. Sarah looked away. I don't know for certain, but a week later, there was unusual activity at the lake. House property, construction equipment, excavation near the boathouse. Maxwell claimed they were reinforcing the shoreline. Eleanor closed her eyes briefly. And Noah? What happened to him? I continued caring for him at the lake house. Maxwell rarely visited. Then about a year later, I was told Noah would be relocated to one of Maxwell's international properties. I begged to go with him. I'd grown to love him like my own, but Maxwell refused. So you took him, Eleanor concluded softly. You took Noah and ran. Sarah nodded, tears streaming down her face. I couldn't bear the thought of what might happen to him. These children are just pawns to Maxwell, inconveniences to be managed. I grabbed Noah some supplies and fled in the middle of the night. The dog, Sentinel they called him, followed us. He'd always been protective of Noah. You've been in hiding for 5 years, Eleanor marveled. Here in Oak Ridge, right under Maxwell's nose? It was the last place he'd look, Sarah explained, and I changed our appearances, used different names. Tommy doesn't even remember being called Noah. But why the train tracks? Eleanor pressed. Why risk everything after? All this time, Sarah's composure finally broke. I'm sick, she confessed, her shoulders shaking with sobs. Terminal diagnosis, 3 months, maybe 4. I couldn't take Tommy with me, and I couldn't leave him with no one to protect him from Maxwell. I thought if I created a public situation, something that would draw attention, it might protect him somehow. The dog was never supposed to be there, but he followed us and wouldn't leave Tommy's side. Eleanor moved to sit beside Sarah, taking the younger woman's hands in hers. You saved my grandson, she said fiercely. And now we're going to save him again, together. Across town, at the Rusty Spoon Diner, Ethan Parker sat in a corner booth, nursing a cup of cooling coffee as he waited for his anonymous source. The lunch rush had ended, leaving only a few scattered customers and a disinterested waitress scrolling on her phone behind the counter. The bell above the door jingled, and Ethan looked up to see Michael Foster enter, scanning the diner nervously, before spotting him and approaching. Thanks for meeting me, Ethan said as Michael slid into the booth. I should have come forward years ago, Michael replied, keeping his voice low. When you were investigating those adoption irregularities. What stopped you? Michael smiled bitterly. 3 million reasons in an offshore account, plus a non-disclosure agreement with penalties that would have left me homeless and possibly imprisoned. And now? Now I have this. Michael slid a small digital recorder across the table. A conversation I recorded 2 years ago at Maxwell's lake house. It was the last straw for me, the reason I quit. He doesn't know I have it. Ethan picked up the device cautiously. What's on it? Maxwell discussing what he calls his contingency protocols for dealing with inconvenient situations. He specifically mentions the dog, Sentinel, as the last reminder of a mistake that could cost me everything. Why come forward now? Michael's expression hardened. Because that baby on the tracks, I'm almost certain he's Jenny Thompson's son, and I've spent 2 years trying to forget what I think happened to her. At the Oak Ridge Animal Rescue Center, Dr. Bennett completed Guardian's latest examination with growing concern. His condition is improving physically, but I'm worried about these anxiety responses, she told Jessica, especially around certain stimuli. Jessica nodded, stroking the dog's head gently. I've been documenting them. It's not just Maxwell Reynolds' voice that triggers him, it's certain phrases, certain sounds. Like what? Construction noises, for one. I was watching a home renovation show in the break room, and when they started using a jackhammer, he completely panicked. And there's something else. Jessica hesitated. It might sound strange, but he has a very specific reaction to the sound of water lapping against wood. I had a nature video playing on my phone, and when it showed a dock with waves hitting it, he started whining and pacing. Dr. Bennett made notes in Guardian's file. These could be trauma responses. Dogs remember contexts and associations, especially traumatic ones. What do you think happened to him? Jessica asked softly. Before Dr. Bennett could answer, her office phone rang. After a brief conversation, she turned to Jessica with a troubled expression. That was the county animal control director. They're filing paperwork to have Guardian transferred to their facility, citing the high-profile nature of the case. What? Why would they do that? He's receiving excellent care here. Politics, Dr. Bennett said grimly. Maxwell Reynolds sits on the county commission that oversees their funding. I'm guessing he wants the dog somewhere he can control access to him. We can't let that happen, Jessica insisted. Guardian is evidence of something. I'm sure of it. Dr. Bennett nodded thoughtfully. I agree, and I think it's time we found out exactly what. At the Department of Children and Family Services, Denise Hoffman sat across from Judge Patricia Washington in the judge's chambers, reviewing the file on Tommy. Sarah Miller's story doesn't add up, Denise explained. She claims to be the child's nanny, but can provide no documentation, no contact information for the supposed mother, not even a last name for the child. Judge Washington, known for her no-nonsense approach to child welfare cases, frowned. What's your assessment? She knows the child intimately, his food preferences, sleep habits, favorite toys. She's definitely been his caretaker, but she's hiding something significant. Has she applied for custody? That's the odd part, Denise replied. She seems genuinely concerned for his welfare, but she's not pushing to regain custody. It's almost as if she wants him to remain in the system for now. DNA testing underway, but will only tell us if she's biologically related, which she denies. We're also running the child's DNA through missing persons databases. Judge Washington removed her reading glasses. And what about this connection to the Reynolds family that's being whispered about? Any substance to it? Denise hesitated. Nothing concrete, just the dog's reported reaction to Maxwell Reynolds on television and some theories from that freelance journalist, Ethan Parker. Parker, Judge Washington repeated with a frown. He's been a thorn in Reynolds' side for years. Not exactly. An unbiased source. True, but a knock at the door interrupted them. Judge Washington's clerk entered with an urgent expression. Your Honor, there's a Ms. Eleanor Thompson here insisting on speaking with you regarding the child found on the train tracks. She claims to be his grandmother. Judge Washington and Denise exchanged surprised glances. Send her in, the judge decided. Eleanor Thompson entered with a straight back and determined eyes, Sarah Miller following nervously behind her. Judge Washington, Ms. Hoffman, thank you for seeing us without an appointment. What I have to tell you couldn't wait another minute. Back at Reynolds Tower, Maxwell paced his office like a caged predator. His carefully orchestrated life was unraveling thread by thread. The baby, Noah, as he'd never allowed himself to think of him, was now in the custody of child services. The dog that had witnessed too much was becoming a focus of unwanted attention. Sarah Miller had disappeared from her apartment, and now Michael Foster had resurfaced, potentially with damaging information. His private phone line rang, displaying a number he recognized as belonging to his security chief at the Lake House property. What is it? He answered tersely. Sir, "We have a situation," the voice on the other end reported. "Someone's been on the property. The area near the boathouse shows signs of disturbance." Maxwell felt his blood run cold. "What kind of disturbance?" "It appears someone has been digging, sir." Maxwell ended the call and immediately dialed another number. "Accelerate the timeline," he ordered without preamble. "I don't care what it takes. I want that dog and that child secured today." As evening fell over Oakridge, the various players in this unfolding drama moved with increasing urgency. Eleanor and Sarah provided sworn statements to Judge Washington. Ethan Parker and Michael Foster analyzed the damning audio recording in Ethan's apartment, preparing a story that would shake Oakridge to its core. Dr. Bennett and Jessica made arrangements to move Guardian to a secure location before the transfer order could be executed. And at the lake house, a property that had stood silent witness to Maxwell Reynolds' darkest secrets, the ground had begun to give up its truths. The steady rain of the past 2 days had caused soil erosion near the boathouse, revealing something that had been carefully buried years before: a woman's weathered wallet, its contents still intact, including a driver's license bearing the name Jennifer Thompson. The storm that had been brewing both literally and figuratively over Oakridge was about to break, washing away the carefully constructed facade of its most powerful citizen and revealing the truth that had been buried beneath years of influence, money, and fear. A fierce summer storm lashed against the windows of Judge Patricia Washington's chambers, where an emergency hearing was now in its second hour. The small room felt charged with tension as Eleanor Thompson concluded her testimony, her voice unwavering despite the emotional weight of her words. "So you believe, Ms. Thompson, that Maxwell Reynolds fathered your daughter's child? And then, when she refused his financial arrangement, he was responsible for her disappearance?" Judge Washington clarified, her expression carefully neutral. "Yes, Your Honor," Eleanor replied, "and I believe the child found on the train tracks is my grandson Noah, who was subsequently taken by Sarah Miller to protect him from Maxwell." Judge Washington turned her attention to Sarah, who sat with shoulders hunched, looking physically diminished by her recent medical diagnosis, but determined nonetheless. "And you, Ms. Miller, maintain that you removed the child from Mr. Reynolds' lake house property because you feared for his welfare?" "I know it was technically kidnapping," Sarah acknowledged, "but I couldn't leave him there. Not after what happened to Jenny, not after what I'd seen happen to other women who challenged Maxwell." Judge Washington made a note in the file before her. "The DNA comparison between the child and Ms. Thompson should provide clarity on their potential relationship. What concerns me most immediately is ensuring the child's safety while we sort through these serious allegations." Denise Hoffman spoke up. "Your Honor, given the circumstances, I recommend the child remain in protective custody with no visitation from Maxwell Reynolds. If the DNA confirms Ms. Thompson is indeed his grandmother, I would support temporary placement with her while the investigation continues." "And what about these other allegations?" Judge Washington asked. "The suggestion that Jennifer Thompson may have been harmed." Eleanor leaned forward. "The wallet, Your Honor. My daughter's wallet was found near the boathouse at Reynolds Lake. A property Jenny would never have left voluntarily without her identification, especially not to another country, as Maxwell claimed. I understand your concern, Ms. Thompson, but that's a matter for law enforcement," Judge Washington replied. "What I can do is issue an emergency order regarding the child and ensure these allegations are properly investigated." As the judge began drafting her order, a court officer entered with an urgent message. After a brief exchange, Judge Washington looked up with a troubled expression. "It seems Mr. Reynolds' attorneys have just filed an emergency petition claiming parental rights to the child, along with a motion to seal all proceedings related to this case, citing privacy concerns and potential damage to Mr. Reynolds' reputation from unfounded allegations. Eleanor gasped. He's admitting paternity. Not explicitly, Judge Washington clarified. The filing suggests he may have a biological connection that needs to be verified, while simultaneously denying any wrongdoing. It's a tactical move to gain control of the proceedings. He can't be allowed near Tommy, Sarah insisted, panic edging into her voice. You don't understand what he's capable of. I understand enough to proceed with caution, Ms. Miller, Judge Washington assured her. This case now has my full attention. Across town at the Oak Ridge Animal Rescue Center, a different kind of confrontation was unfolding. Dr. Bennett stood firmly in the reception area, blocking the path of two county animal control officers, and a man in an expensive suit who had introduced himself as Lawrence Whitman, special counsel to Maxwell Reynolds. I don't care what paperwork you have, Dr. Bennett stated firmly. Guardian is under medical treatment and cannot be moved without endangering his recovery. Dr. Bennett, Whitman replied with practiced patience, this is a straightforward administrative transfer. Mr. Reynolds has generously offered the resources of his private animal sanctuary to ensure the dog receives the best possible care. How convenient, Dr. Bennett observed dryly. And this sudden concern for the dog's welfare has nothing to do with the fact that he reacts violently whenever he hears Mr. Reynolds' voice. Whitman's smile tightened. I'm not aware of any such behavior, though I'd caution against anthropomorphizing an animal's random responses to stimuli. Now, if you'll step aside. I can't do that, Dr. Bennett interrupted. I filed an emergency veterinary hold citing Guardian's unstable medical condition. Until that's reviewed by the State Veterinary Board, he stays here. Whitman's cordial facade slipped momentarily. Dr. Bennett, you're interfering with a legitimate legal process. Mr. Reynolds is prepared to be extremely generous to your facility if this transition proceeds smoothly. Conversely, he would be deeply disappointed if obstacles were unnecessarily created. Is that a bribe or a threat, Mr. Whitman? Dr. Bennett asked, her voice carrying clearly in the now silent reception area. Before Whitman could respond, the center's doors opened and Sheriff David Martinez entered, accompanied by two deputies. Sheriff, Whitman greeted smoothly. Perfect timing. Perhaps you can help explain to Dr. Bennett the importance of complying with official county directives. Sheriff Martinez, a stocky man with 25 years in law enforcement and a reputation for straight dealing, studied the paperwork Whitman extended toward him. These seem to be in order, he acknowledged, before turning to Dr. Bennett. And your emergency hold? Dr. Bennett handed him her own documentation, filed this morning, legally binding until reviewed by the board. The sheriff nodded thoughtfully. Then it appears we have competing legal claims that need to be resolved through proper channels. He turned to Whitman, which means the dog stays where he is until a judge sorts it out. Sheriff, with all due respect, Mr. Whitman, Sheriff. Martinez interrupted. I've known Rachel Bennett since she was treating my daughter's 4-H rabbits 15 years ago. If she says that dog isn't medically fit to be moved, I believe her. Whitman's expression darkened. Sheriff, do you understand who you're obstructing here? I understand exactly who's involved, Sheriff Martinez replied evenly, which is precisely why I'm going to ensure everything proceeds by the book. No shortcuts, no exceptions, no matter whose name is on the letterhead. After Whitman and the animal control officers departed with barely concealed frustration, Jessica emerged from the back room where she'd been listening. That was amazing, she told Dr. Bennett, but they'll be back with something else, won't they? Undoubtedly, Dr. Bennett agreed, which is why Guardian won't be here when they return. Sheriff Martinez, who had remained behind, nodded grimly. I've been hearing troubling things about this whole situation. Ethan Parker reached out to me this morning with some concerning information regarding Maxwell Reynolds and potentially serious crimes. The dog is evidence, Jessica said urgently. His reactions aren't random. He was there when something happened to Jenny Thompson. I believe you, the sheriff assured her. That's why I'm going to help you move him somewhere safe until we can sort this out properly. At the Oak Ridge Herald, Ethan Parker and Michael Foster worked frantically to assemble their exposé on Maxwell Reynolds. The recorded conversation from the lake house was damning, with Maxwell clearly referring to permanent solutions and necessary sacrifices in relation to problems that threatened his reputation. We need to be careful how we frame this, Ethan cautioned. Reynolds' lawyers will come at us with everything they've got. Every word needs to be defensible. Michael nodded grimly. I can testify to what I witnessed at the lake house the week Jenny disappeared. The unusual construction activity, Maxwell's. Private security keeping everyone away from the boathouse area, the way he ordered Sentinel, the dog, to be dealt with afterward because the animal had become unmanageable after Jenny's departure. Why didn't you come forward sooner? Ethan asked, the question that had been nagging at him. Michael's expression crumpled with shame. Fear, mostly, and guilt. I didn't directly witness anything illegal, but I knew something wasn't right. Maxwell made it clear that loyalty would be rewarded and questions would be punished. By the time I found the courage to leave, it felt too late to speak up. Their conversation was interrupted by Ethan's phone ringing, Eleanor Thompson calling. With an update on the emergency hearing, as Ethan listened, his expression grew increasingly alarmed. Reynolds is claiming paternity and trying to gain custody, he repeated, catching Michael's stunned expression. He's getting desperate, which makes him dangerous. Eleanor, you and Sarah need to be extremely careful. Reynolds has resources and connections we can only guess at. After ending the call, Ethan turned to Michael. We need to accelerate our timeline. Reynolds is making his move. At the Reynolds estate, Maxwell sat in his wood-paneled study, a glass of 30-year-old scotch untouched before him as he contemplated the rapidly deteriorating situation. His private investigator had just informed him that Sarah Miller was now working with Eleanor Thompson, a development he hadn't anticipated. The judge handling the case, Patricia Washington, was one of the few local officials his influence hadn't reached. And now Sheriff Martinez was interfering with his attempt to secure the dog. The walls were closing in, and Maxwell Reynolds was unaccustomed to feeling cornered. His secure phone line rang, displaying his security chief's number again. What now? Maxwell answered tersely. Sir, we have another problem at the lake house. The erosion near the boathouse has worsened with the storm. There's significant exposure of the area in question. Maxwell closed his eyes briefly. Secure the site. No one in or out. I'll be there within the hour. As he hung up, Maxwell contemplated his options. He had contingency plans for almost every scenario. His success had been built on anticipating problems before they materialized. But he'd never imagined that a baby and a dog on train tracks would be the catalyst for his undoing. His desktop phone buzzed with his assistant's voice. Mr. Reynolds, Ms. Victoria Wells from Child Protective Services is here regarding your petition for custody. Maxwell composed himself, straightening his tie and arranging his features into the concerned expression he'd perfected over decades of public appearances. Send her in. Victoria Wells entered with professional efficiency, her crisp pantsuit and tablet suggesting a by-the-book approach that Maxwell hoped to circumvent with his usual charm. Ms. Wells, thank you for coming personally, he greeted, gesturing to the chair across from his desk. This is obviously a sensitive matter that requires discretion. Mr. Reynolds, she responded coolly, I should clarify that I'm here to conduct a preliminary assessment based on your custody petition, not to offer any assurances. Judge Washington has ordered a comprehensive review before any decisions are made. Maxwell's smile remained fixed. Of course. I merely want to establish my willingness to cooperate fully. The child's welfare is my only concern. Is that why you've never acknowledged his existence until now? Victoria asked bluntly. According to our information, the child is approximately 6 years old, yet there's no record of you ever providing support or involvement in his life. Maxwell's expression hardened slightly. The circumstances were complicated. I was led to believe the child had been relocated internationally with his mother. It was only when I saw the news reports that I recognized the possibility of a connection. Victoria made notes on her tablet. And your relationship with Jennifer Thompson, the child's alleged mother. A brief personal relationship that ended amicably, Maxwell replied smoothly. Ms. Thompson accepted a generous settlement and relocation. Mr. Reynolds, Victoria interrupted. Jennifer Thompson's wallet was recently found on your lake house property, partially buried near the boathouse. Would you care to explain that? For the first time in the conversation, Maxwell's composure faltered visibly. I was not aware of that development. Sheriff Martinez has opened an investigation into Jennifer Thompson's disappearance, Victoria continued. Given these circumstances, Judge Washington has suspended consideration of your custody petition pending the outcome of that investigation. Maxwell stood abruptly. This is absurd. I'm being subjected to a witch hunt based on circumstantial evidence and the manipulations of a disturbed former employee who kidnapped a child from my property. Victoria remained seated, her expression unfazed by his outburst. Mr. Reynolds, I advise you to retain criminal counsel immediately. This situation has evolved beyond a simple custody matter. As the storm intensified over Oak Ridge, the various threads of the investigation began to converge. Sheriff Martinez assembled a team to execute a search warrant at Reynolds Lake House property, focusing on the area around the boathouse where Jennifer Thompson's wallet had been found. Ethan Parker and Michael Foster prepared to publish their exposé, coordinating with national media outlets to ensure maximum impact and protection from Reynolds' inevitable legal response. Eleanor Thompson and Sarah Miller remained under protective supervision at a location known only to Judge Washington and Denise Hoffman, while DNA tests were expedited to confirm Tommy's identity as Noah Thompson. And at a small veterinary clinic 30 miles outside Oak Ridge, Jessica Walker sat on the floor of a kennel, her arm draped protectively over Guardian as the German shepherd finally fell into a peaceful sleep, far from the man whose voice had triggered such fear and far from the property where he had witnessed events no one was ever meant to discover. As midnight approached, the storm that had been gathering both in the skies and in the tangled human drama below reached its peak. Lightning illuminated the boathouse at Reynolds Lake property, where Sheriff Martinez stood in the pouring rain, staring grimly at what his deputies had just uncovered beneath the recently eroded soil: human remains. Dawn broke over Oak Ridge with tentative golden rays piercing through the dissipating storm clouds. The town awoke to news that would forever alter its perception of the man who had shaped its destiny for decades. The Oak Ridge Herald's website had crashed under the unprecedented traffic after Ethan Parker published his explosive investigation at midnight. The buried truths of Maxwell Reynolds, power, coercion, and the secrets of the lake house. National news vans lined Main Street. Their satellite dishes pointed skyward as reporters delivered breathless updates against the backdrop of Reynolds Tower gleaming in the morning light. The story had transcended local interest, tapping into the nation's fascination with the fall of powerful men who had believed themselves untouchable. In a modest conference room at the Oak Ridge Medical Center, Eleanor Thompson sat beside Sarah Miller, both women watching in silent amazement as Tommy, now confirmed through DNA testing to be Noah Thompson, played on the floor with building blocks, oblivious to the momentous revelations swirling around him. A court-appointed child psychologist observed from the corner, making occasional notes, but primarily allowing the boy space to adjust to his new reality. "He looks so much like Jenny at that age," Eleanor whispered, tears gathering in her eyes. "And the same determined little frown when he's concentrating." Sarah nodded, her own eyes wet. "He's always been that way, so focused once he sets his mind to something. I used to tell him he had an old soul." Eleanor reached over to squeeze Sarah's thin hand. "You saved him. I can never repay you for that." "I just wish I could have saved Jenny too," Sarah replied, her voice breaking slightly. "If I had spoken up sooner." "You did what you could in an impossible situation," Eleanor assured her. "And now, because of you, the truth is finally coming out." The conversation was interrupted by a gentle knock at the door. Denise Hoffman entered, accompanied by Judge Washington and Sheriff Martinez, their expressions somber but determined. "Ladies," Judge Washington began, "I wanted to update you personally on the latest developments. The remains found at the lake house property have been preliminarily identified as Jennifer Thompson's through dental records." Eleanor closed her eyes briefly, a soft sound of pain escaping despite her composure. Though she had long suspected her daughter's fate, the confirmation still struck with devastating force. "I'm deeply sorry for your loss, Ms. Thompson," Sheriff Martinez said quietly. "I promise you, everyone involved will be held accountable." "Maxwell?" Eleanor asked, her voice steady despite her grief. "In custody," the sheriff confirmed, along with 2 of his security personnel who've been implicated in the concealment of evidence. The district attorney is preparing charges of obstruction of justice, with more serious charges pending the medical examiner's final report. Judge Washington turned her attention to the child playing contentedly on the floor. "As for Noah's custody, given the confirmed DNA match showing Ms. Thompson is his biological grandmother, and considering Ms. Miller's ongoing role as his primary caretaker, I'm prepared to grant joint guardianship to both of you, pending final review." "Joint guardianship," Sarah repeated, surprise evident in her voice. "Yes," Judge Washington explained with a gentle smile. "It seems the most sensible solution. Noah needs stability and continuity of care, which you provide, Ms. Miller. He also deserves to know his family heritage and have the support of his grandmother. Together you can give him everything he needs. But my health situation," Sarah began hesitantly. "Which is precisely why shared guardianship makes sense," Denise interjected. "You'll have support during your treatment, and Noah will have a gradual transition if your condition progresses." The unspoken reality hung in the air, Sarah's terminal diagnosis giving urgency to these arrangements. Yet in the midst of this acknowledgement was also a gift. Sarah would not have to face her illness alone, and Noah would not lose another caretaker without preparation and support. "There's one more thing," Sheriff Martinez added. "The dog, guardian, or sentinel as he was originally called, has been cleared for release from protective custody. Dr. Bennett suggested he might do well reuniting with Noah under the right circumstances." Eleanor and Sarah exchanged meaningful glances before Eleanor spoke. "I think that would be perfect. That dog protected my grandson when no one else could. He deserves to be part of this family." Across town at the Oak Ridge County Detention Center, Maxwell Reynolds sat in an isolation cell, his bespoke suit exchanged for an orange jumpsuit that hung awkwardly on his frame. Through his high-priced attorney, he had already issued a statement proclaiming his innocence and characterizing the allegations as a vindictive campaign orchestrated by disgruntled former employees with personal vendettas. But Oakridge was no longer listening to Maxwell Reynolds. The carefully constructed image he had maintained for decades had shattered overnight, revealing the ruthless calculation beneath the philanthropic facade. In interview rooms throughout the building, former employees of Reynolds Enterprises were coming forward with their own stories. Accounts of intimidation, hush money, and a corporate culture built on fear and loyalty to the man rather than principles. The dam had broken, and years of suppressed truths were flooding out. Lawrence Whitman, Reynolds' special counsel, sat across from Michael Foster in a conference room at the district attorney's office, his usual confidence noticeably diminished. "Mr. Foster," Whitman began, "Mr. Reynolds is prepared to offer significant compensation in exchange for your discretion regarding certain privileged conversations you may have witnessed during your employment." Michael smiled without humor. "You mean the conversations I already recorded and provided to the district attorney? Those privileged conversations?" Whitman's expression soured. "You signed a non-disclosure agreement with severe penalties." "NDAs don't cover criminal activity," Michael replied calmly. "Something you know perfectly well, Counselor." "This vendetta will cost you everything," Whitman threatened. "Maxwell Reynolds still has powerful friends." "Not anymore," Michael countered. "Not after what was found at the lake house. Not after people have seen who he really is." The board of Reynolds Enterprises called an emergency session this morning to remove him as CEO. The Reynolds Foundation trustees are scrambling to distance themselves. Even his wife has filed for separation. Whitman fell silent, the reality of his client's collapsing empire settling over him. Michael leaned forward. "For years, I helped him bury his secrets. I told myself it was just business, just protecting a powerful man's privacy. But it was never just business to the people he hurt. To Jenny Thompson, it wasn't business, it was her life. To Noah, it wasn't business, it was his future. To all those women silenced with money and threats, it wasn't business, it was trauma they'll carry forever." "What do you want?" Whitman asked tiredly. "Justice," Michael answered simply. "Nothing more, nothing less." At the small veterinary clinic outside Oakridge, Jessica Walker and Dr. Bennett prepared Guardian for his reunion with Noah. The German Shepherd had made remarkable progress in the safe environment, his physical condition improving steadily and his anxiety responses diminishing. "I'm going to miss this guy," Jessica admitted as she brushed Guardian's coat to a glossy shine. "You've done amazing work with him," Dr. Bennett praised. "He trusts you completely now." Jessica nodded thoughtfully. "It's not just about trust, though. It's about healing. He was carrying so much trauma, witnessing whatever happened at that lake house, being separated from Noah, being mistreated afterward. Animals absorb our traumas and carry them without complaint. Much like children do," Dr. Bennett observed quietly. "Exactly," Jessica agreed. "That's why this reunion is so important. Noah and Guardian need each other to fully heal." The door opened and Denise Hoffman entered with Eleanor, Sarah, and Noah. The moment the child spotted the German Shepherd, his eyes widened with recognition and delight. "Sentinel!" he cried, using the dog's original name without prompting, a fragment of early memory surfacing naturally. Guardian's reaction was equally profound. His ears perked forward, his tail began to wag tentatively, and a soft whine escaped him as he strained toward the boy. Jessica carefully released his leash, and the dog moved forward with gentle restraint, as if understanding the moment's significance. Noah wrapped his arms around Guardian's neck, burying his face in the dog's fur. The German shepherd stood patiently, his entire body quivering with emotion, before gently licking the child's cheek once, twice. A reunion 6 years in the making. There wasn't a dry eye in the room as they witnessed this reunion, a testament to the unbreakable bond between a boy and the dog who had protected him through the darkest of circumstances. 3 weeks later, as summer gave way to the first hints of autumn, Oakridge began the slow process of redefining itself in the aftermath of Maxwell Reynolds' downfall. Reynolds Enterprises underwent restructuring under new leadership committed to ethical practices. The Reynolds Foundation was renamed and reorganized with a community-led board to continue its beneficial work without the tainted legacy of its founder. At Eleanor Thompson's house, now home to Eleanor, Sarah, Noah, and Guardian, a small celebration marked Noah's 7th birthday. The modest gathering included those who had played key roles in bringing the truth to light: Ethan Parker, Michael Foster, Dr. Bennett, Jessica Walker, Sheriff Martinez, Denise Hoffman, and Judge Washington. As the adults conversed quietly on the porch, Noah and Guardian played in the yard, their joyful interaction a powerful reminder of why their fight for truth had mattered so deeply. The DA says the case against Reynolds is airtight, Sheriff Martinez informed the group. Between the physical evidence, the recordings, and the witness testimonies, he's facing substantial time. What about the other children? Eleanor asked. The ones Sarah mentioned from the lake house. Michael nodded solemnly. They've been located. All 3 are in good health, though they've been isolated from normal childhood experiences. The authorities are working to connect them with biological relatives where possible. And the mothers? Dr. Bennett inquired. 2 have been found. So far, Ethan explained. Both were coerced into giving up their children with combinations of threats and payments. They've agreed to testify. Sarah, thinner now, but with a peaceful strength in her eyes, watched Noah from her comfortable chair. Her treatment had begun, offering no promises but providing precious time and hope. I never imagined it would end this way, she reflected. For years, I lived in constant fear that he would find us. I convinced myself that running and hiding was the only option. Sometimes we need others to help us stand and fight, Judge Washington observed. No one should have to face such battles alone. As evening approached and the gathering began to disperse, Eleanor found herself standing beside Ethan Parker near the garden gate. Your reporting made all the difference, she told him. Without your persistence over the years, Maxwell might have succeeded in burying the truth forever. Ethan shook his head. It wasn't just me. It was Sarah finding the courage to come forward. It was Michael breaking his silence. It was Jessica and Dr. Bennett protecting Guardian. It was you never giving up on finding answers about Jenny and Noah. He paused, looking back at the yard where Noah was now curled up beside Guardian on the grass, both boy and dog content in the safety of their newfound home. It was even that miraculous moment on the train tracks when fate or luck or something more profound intervened. Eleanor smiled, her eyes reflecting the sunset's golden light. Jenny used to say that truth is like water. It always finds a way to the surface, no matter how deep you bury it. In the months and years that followed, Oakridge would rebuild its identity around principles stronger than the influence of any single individual. The story of Noah Thompson and Guardian would be remembered not just as a scandal that toppled a powerful man, but as a testament to the enduring bonds between a child and a dog who had protected each other when the adult world had failed them. Both. The train tracks, where their journey back to truth had begun, became a place of reflection for the town, a reminder that miracles sometimes arrive in unexpected forms, and that even the most carefully buried secrets eventually find their way into the light. As for Noah, he would grow up surrounded by love, with a grandmother who cherished him, a guardian who had risked everything to protect him, and a loyal German shepherd who had been witness to his earliest traumas and would remain faithfully by his side through the healing that followed, living proof that sometimes the most profound loyalty comes from those who cannot speak, but whose hearts remember everything. Dear listeners, we hope that Noah and Guardian's journey has touched your hearts as deeply as it has touched ours. Some stories remind us that the bonds we forge in adversity can become our greatest strength, and that truth, no matter how deeply buried, will always find its way to the light. If this story moved you, please take a moment to subscribe to our channel and like this video. Your support helps us continue bringing these powerful narratives to life. We've prepared a special playlist with equally compelling stories about extraordinary connections between humans and animals that you can find by clicking to your left. Every day, we strive to share unique stories that explore the complexity and beauty of life's unexpected journeys. What touched you most about Noah and Guardian's story? We look forward to reading your thoughts in the comments section below. Until our next story, remember that sometimes miracles come with 4 paws and a faithful heart.